Good afternoon. I'm Lala, Michel. We would like to explain a little bit what is going to happen now. I would first like to introduce Michel. Michel is one of the most intelligent men I've ever met, and I met many, and also the funniest. And he is the person, I think, that globally knows better how this transition we are all talking about is possible. He knows this because formerly he was an entrepreneur himself, very successful in the tech telecommunications industry in Belgium. And at a given point, he decided that all his knowledge should be in service of this transition. So he started the Peer-to-Peer Foundation. And the Peer-to-Peer Foundation is the place to know how and why. So he studies deeply how this transition can happen, and he has 23,000 entries on actual experiments on this. So it's amazing. And he will start, and then I am a howist. He will present me a little bit now. And then I will talk about how we can scale up collaboration, departing from what he will tell us. Maybe you should present me when I start.
Okay, we'll do that.
So,
yes.
Please.
So let me first push the button here. There's supposed to be a slide with pictures that is not here. So it's actually the other slide that I wanted, but no problem, because it was just meant as a background. All right, so basically, because I only have 15 minutes, I want to introduce some key terms that I use in my work. And let me maybe explain why this is important. So I think most of you will
This is my presentation, so Michel's was one slide, one picture. But if it's not there, it's okay.
It's okay, yeah. So I think most of us, feel that we have entered a period of change. And kind of the feeling is that we are in a descending spiral right now, right? We were in an ascending spiral where things were improving for a long time, and now we are feeling that with the pandemic, with Ukraine conflict, we sense that the supply chains are disrupted. So we sense that we are in an ascending spiral. And so at some point I thought that it was really important to understand how transitions occur. And so that was about 20 years ago when I switched from being a startupper, working as a strategy manager for a big telco, and I started studying transitions, and I came up basically with the conclusion that seed forms are very important. So in other words, if we move from one form of civilization to another, the solutions that people are looking while the civilization is in a downward spiral are not going to be the same logic as the civilization that is slowly disintegrating. So the people are going to find other examples, other logics in order to solve their issues. So just to give you a basic idea, think about the emergence of capitalism. You would have to think about purgatory. Before purgatory, if you were a Christian in medieval Europe, you could not lend money without going to hell. So purgatory was an ideological invention that allowed the financial system to emerge in the cities. The printing press, double entry book accounting. So these are all seed forms that emerge separately, start to form subsystems, and then form eventually become a new form of society. So here's the question that we should ask today is, what are the types of seed forms that we see emerging? So here is basically what I propose that we should look at. The first dynamic, I think, that is very, very different today is what we call peer-to-peer, Well, think about, maybe you're familiar with this idea of the Dunbar number. So this is an anthropologist that basically thought that people can trust and remember about 150 people in a small village. So as long as you stay under that scale, you stay small, you stay convivial, you can solve issues by talking to your family and neighbors. As soon as you move up that scale, it's no longer possible to do that because the cost of transactions and coordination is too expensive, and so we invent hierarchy. And hierarchical systems tended to be stronger and bigger than small systems and overtook them. So this is a big change today, is that we have now the capacity to coordinate translocally using digital means, right? So that means that after thousands of years of geographical organization, we now have a few dozen years of experience in translocal organization. So basically, we now have a civilization which has to deal with two different levels and has to think about how to combine them together. So what this gives us things like open source, like Linux and Drupal and Arduino. And so we have all these communities in the world that choose to work together at a global scale to make commons. So this is the second term I want to briefly explain to you. So what are the commons? So I think we are all familiar with states and with markets. And for the last 400 years, this has been the dominant paradigm that we've been working with. Either we need more statist people, or we need more market-oriented people. This has been the political struggle for 400 years within our, let's say, capitalist political economy. But there's one institution we have forgotten, and that is the institution of the commons, which still exists in many, many places, but less so in the West, because we have thought for 400 years that privatization worked better than the commons. So what are the commons? 3 rules. Commons are collective resources that can be material or immaterial, that are maintained by a community or a group of stakeholders, but crucially, they invent and follow their own rulemaking, right? So this distinguishes the commons from both the state form and the market form. Now, if you look at the history, and this is what I call the pulsation of the commons, you would see that any human civilization has an ascending phase in which the extractive institutions of the market and the commons are dominant, and the commons tend to weaken. But as soon as the civilization or society enters its B phase, it has overshot its regional planetary boundaries, you see a revival of the commons. The commons are the only human institution that is able to preserve resources over the long term. So for example, you would look at today at a picture of the planet, and you would see Austria, Switzerland, Japan are very, very green. The reason is, of course, that the mountain flanks in these countries are managed by the villagers themselves, who have developed rules to use them sustainably over generations. So today we have entered a period of revival of commoning, but the difference is, of course, that the commons today can be digital, right? So we can globally scale knowledge commons. So think about, for example, permaculture. You are, with your feet in the mud, doing local food growing. You are connected to your community of the people that are physically around you doing the same thing. But also, very crucially today, you are connected to the global commons of knowledge of permaculturists. For example, the permaculture design course, right? So this is a model that we call cosmolocalism. So one of the things you might think about is that wars are often systemic wars. So think about World War I, which is a war that destroyed the imperial systems from Austria-Hungary, the Ottomans, etc. Think about World War II, which was fascism, Stalinism, and parliamentary democracy fighting each other. I would even argue that today Ukraine is pretty much a market-oriented side and a state sovereignist side. So there's different sensibilities, different systemic choices, and those systems are battling it out. Cosmolocalism is something different. So what is cosmolocalism? The basic rule of cosmolocal project is very simple. If it's heavy, it's local. And if it's light, it's global and shared. So before COVID, I was in Mumbai talking with people on Solar Lamp. I haven't checked them recently, but just to give you the idea. So Solar Lamp is an open design. It's a shared open design. So it's a common design. It's a global commons that allows anybody in the world to locally produce the solar lamp. Solar lamp is a renewable, is a lamp that works with renewable energy that allows children in poor villages that have no electricity to have light in the evening and to study. So that then is connected with online courses that take about 10 minutes. It's a whole system, and I'm sorry, I forgot the name of that project, but it has allowed 400,000 students from villages to study at the university level in India, right? So you see the idea is you have a global design which can be used everywhere, but you have a local manufacturing of the product, and the knowledge is freely distributed. To give you maybe another example, in Brussels there's something called a microfactory. The microfactory is part of a network of 120 multi-factories. So these are craftspeople that work with matter, textiles, 3D printing. They look for cheap rent in the industrial fringes of the cities in Europe. They're organized as a cooperative, but then they have something called the invisible factory. And the invisible factory is their knowledge commons, where they basically share all their knowledge, their scientific knowledge, their technical knowledge, and their experience. So why is this interesting? Today we spend 3 times as much on transporting things than on making things, right? So the idea to relocalize manufacturing, to relocalize production is quite an interesting strategy to diminish the human footprint. And when you add to that mutualization, you add another layer. So for example, I was in Ghent, so I mapped out the urban commons in the city of Ghent. There were 50 in 2008 and 500 in 2016. So there's a 10-fold increase in cities since the crisis of 2008 of people in urban areas mutualizing their provisioning system. So for example, you want organic food. If the state and the market are not well providing for it, you can create collective purchasing groups and make deals with organic farmers. Just maybe 2 examples just to make it real. Terre des Liens in France is a community land trust that buys up land and then gives cheap rent to organic farmers. And they're very strong in Normandy and Bretagne. They're so successful that they save 350 million euro a year to the French state in depolluting the water supply. There's an experiment in a German city where the commercial transport was replaced by electric vans and cargo bikes, and that resulted in a 95% reduction in the cost of transport and material and energy while maintaining the same level of service. So this is called factor 20 reduction, and so there are plenty of people that are trying to work on this. Okay, so maybe one more thing, and I'm not sure about the time.
Yes.
Am I over the time?
Oui.
Okay, so I'll just conclude, and then I will present to you Lala. So just to conclude, I use the notion of a contributory economy. It's very important to realize that when we change civilization logics, it's not just an evolution, it's a transvaluation, right? So we have people reacting against what is wrong in the old system and inventing something that is quite new. And I think today the shift that you have to look out for is the contributory economy. Within those peer production communities that are working in this cosmolocal way, they are reinventing value. And it's not just commodity value based on extraction, It's a recognition of the contribution of all the people who work in the ecosystem and trying to find ways to value their work and contribution. I'll stop here and I'll present Lala. So I met Lala in Brazil. I went a few times to Brazil, and I was quite impressed with her work. So we had a project in the P2P Foundation, which is called 100 Women of P2P. So she was one of the 100. She's been an actress, so quite famous in Brazil. And she's very active in the cultural center. The way I know Lala was basically as an extraordinary facilitator and as a futurist. The way that Lala works, I think, is very interesting. She works around desired futures. So she makes people dream about what they really want in their lives, but then she makes it happen. So she has a whole set of tools and methods which accompany people in their journey to their desired future. So I think we have a lot to learn to you, and yeah, I give you the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. So, considering what Michel just said, that civilizations have transitions, and this transition is a transition toward the commons. What I prepared was a very fast overview on how, because we see that all of us desire the same thing, but the question is how. And I am a howist. I have been doing this in many, many fields, but always in environments of high responsibility. For instance, I was part of the team that spread the idea of creative economy in the UN system and working in 4 continents. And I worked in Brazil for national projects on local development and so on. So things that really have to result. And during this process of almost 40 years now, a method was designed. And what is, I think, what we are going through, it's very clear, is the biggest transition in the history of humanity. But the thing is that what before took hundreds of thousands of years now happens in decades or years. And the point is that this transition, web, digital, brings something that never happened before, because the web is outside time and space. And being outside time and space, it's exponential. But the problem is that we, time, and the planet are not. So we have linear capacity to respond to exponential challenges. But there must be a solution. And the solution is the commons, is to converge, to do 2 things together. But it's amazing how this doesn't happen spontaneously. So in order to converge, we need technology, of course, but we also need collaboration. That is the social and human part of this. So in the crisis in 2008 had, with it, the tech giants grow, giants that convert data, infrastructure, markets. And now the next phase is about the giants of collaboration that converge capabilities, time, surplus, partners. And that is the point, how we can converge all those things. And only by this combination we manage. But the problem is that our ability to cooperate is more or less like this. And it's not at all spontaneous. And we've seen hundreds and hundreds of fantastic projects that didn't succeed because they were naive. They thought that the good intention was enough. And how now the path to hell is paved with good intentions. So the question is, how do we do this? So the first thing we need is to simplify and understand the flow, what's going on, how to structure something. We need a common compass. And the compass has what? Has 2 coordinates. So one, we're used to it. It's tangible, material. The other one is really usually unseen, which is intangible. the basis of creative economy and the basis of everything that we're seeing in digital, that manages to be exponential. When we combine these two coordinates, we have a compass. We have 4 dimensions. But the thing, too, in the tangible, so the environmental and the financial not being that much tangible, and the cultural and social. What happens is that so far there's a missing link. It's super curious that we still don't put the 4 dimensions. So it's a compass that misses a leg. And this leg is the key. This is why we always have cultural wars. So this missing link is the cultural dimension. So this compass provides some lenses. With these lenses that include, we're always wishing for the desirable future. We don't make scenarios. We try to find out what people want, because if they want, they do it, as Edgar showed us yesterday, how playing we can achieve things. So this is a combination of desirable futures, 4 dimensions, 4 new economies. And society and economy are a combination of these 4, like the world is a combination of 4 elements. So what I do journeys to turn isolated projects that are solutions for the future into collaborative impact ecosystems that invest therefore the resources to achieve 4D impact, and they do so by sharing infrastructure. We had a lot of methods, gadgets, and things to do that. And I'll give you a brief idea of what this can be. So, for instance, the first thing we do, this was for Globo, which is the biggest Brazilian TV. And the first thing we do is understand the needs in 4 dimensions, because it's useless to solve the question, anything in just 1 dimension. Then we can also map resources, non-monetary resources. And with these resources, a lot can be done. So this is Martadero in Cochabamba, Bolivia. They have 10 years now. They use the method. And they managed to do things using 30% money and the rest with 4D flow. And all the management, all the design of the projects, everything is 4D. If we have these lenses, we can map stakeholders and qualify them. And by doing this, we can have some matchmaking. And this matchmaking, for instance, is last year's process with São Paulo Fashion Week. It's very big in Brazil, the 5th in the world, or 3rd. And we had a regeneration journey converging 50 small enterprises. And by matching their desires and their assets, they co-created 54 new businesses, products, and so on in 75 days through this journey. We have methods to attribute value, because we talk a lot about, with all these possibilities that David was talking about, of blockchain and so on, we can evaluate things. But the thing is, we don't have criteria, or if we have, they're very complicated. And this, for the perspective, is extremely useful to understand the effect of what you're doing, because we check the viability, the impact, the relevance, and the reach of what we are doing. And there is another example, super interesting. This was a program financed by the European Union, and it was reshaping the art world. And one of the prototypes resulting of this project was a tool, tech tool, to make a 4D evaluation of cultural projects, because it's very difficult to evaluate cultural projects because they are intangible. They have different results. From this experience, what I learned? I learned that we, the ones that work to change the world, many times we belong to project land. And project land is very good at this. We have a desirable future, we design an idea, and if we succeed, we make it become something physical. But we don't manage to reach the audience, neither to make it sustainable. Business land, sustainable in the sense of surviving. Business land is the opposite. It starts in the financial, it reaches the market, and then it tries to find the desirable future. And project land and business land don't get along very well, but they must. So the thing is how? Project land usually raises funds to start something and then use this money to do what we want, and then money finishes, and then again and again and again, and we are always beginning from zero. While business land invests this money in building the infrastructure to create new businesses and to achieve exponential growth. So this is what we need. You won't find someone from project land that have recurrent earnings. So the key, I learned this from Michel, is we have a common shared purpose, and that is solving some need of society. Usually, we know how to do the cultural part, which is the designing of the solution. But usually we spend 80% of the time trying to do what we don't know and don't like, which is the infrastructure, the selling, communicating, managing, and so on. But if we have a shared structure, then what can happen? We can share resources, because each business has the budget for everything. But our needs are similar: infrastructure, communication, channels to sell, etc. So if we share them in a common structure, we will meet everybody's needs and something will remain. And this can be invested in common projects that can generate spin-offs, that can generate recurring earnings and fund new projects. So how do we achieve this? One of the possibilities is platform co-ops, shared infrastructure. You have your brand, you dedicate your time to what you do, your solution, and then the rest is shared. And this is particularly possible if instead of doing things for, we do things with. I once asked someone I was working to of huge company that have 7 million employees. And I said, have you ever thought about doing things between them and not to? And for all your clients. So this is amazing if we change, instead of being centralizing, working to, but working with. And then this is possible how? Economy is like an iceberg. We only see the top. And the top is GDP, or maybe sometimes a little bit that we transaction to barter of the surplus. But there is a huge part not seen. It is this for the resources we work with, and all the things Michel works with, which is this contributive economy plus the nature's economy. And it is possible in these journeys to have a platform that connects and exchanges everything that is below the iceberg and converges these in collective projects for shared purposes. Then we meet the needs of the people and the desires. I will soon explain a little bit more on this, about on how can this work, For example, in one project like the Amazon Fun Park, we are working together. They are building up the hardware, and we are designing these journeys to provide all the apparatus that will be used inside the park, from furniture to the content. I will explain this in the other room, Tile's room, briefly. And so if you want to know a little more on the house, you're welcome. And if you want to know more about me, some books, you can find them in my website. And also for those that speak Portuguese, I write for Época Negócios, which is a business magazine in Brazil that is online also. So that's it. Thank you.